What if the sci-fi films we once laughed at, booed, or abandoned ended up shaping the future of cinema? These weren't instant classics. They were mocked, misunderstood, even written off as disasters. But time has a way of flipping the script. Stick around because the very movies that bombed hardest are now the ones fans refuse to let go of. Starship Troopers, 1997. Imagine a movie so over the top, critics thought it was just brainless explosions and shiny uniforms. That was Starship Troopers in 1997. Paul Verhoeven, the director behind RoboCop and Total Recall, delivered a satirical jab at militarism and propaganda, disguised as a bug-blasting action flick. The problem? Almost nobody got the joke at first. Critics mocked it as campy, shallow, and silly. Audiences expecting another straightforward blockbuster walked out confused. At the box office, it barely made back its budget, and many assumed it was a forgettable misfire. But here's where the irony kicks in. Those exaggerated propaganda commercials, the stiff performances, and even the cartoonish bug battles were all intentional. Verhoeven was holding up a mirror, daring audiences to laugh at the very thing he was skewering. And over time, fans did just that. On home video and cable, people began to see the layers. Suddenly, the soldier's stiff delivery wasn't bad, acting it was biting satire. The overblown battles weren't just spectacle, they were parody. And that infamous "would you like to know more?" line became a rallying cry for cult fans who finally saw the movie's hidden brilliance. Today, Starship Troopers is studied in film classes, referenced in memes, and celebrated at conventions. What once looked like dumb popcorn fodder is now recognized as one of the sharpest sci-fi satires of the 90s. The film didn't change. We just finally caught up. Donnie Darko, 2001. Released in the shadow of national tragedy. Donnie Darko had one of the most cursed release schedules imaginable. In the fall of 2001, audiences weren't exactly lining up for a dark teen drama featuring plane crashes and time travel. Box office numbers were dismal. Critics, too, were divided. Some called it pretentious nonsense. Others said it felt like an unfinished student film. It looked destined to vanish without a trace. But then came DVD. Donnie Darko became the ultimate word-of-mouth sleeper hit. College dorm rooms echoed with debates about Frank the Rabbit tangent universes and the haunting Tears for Fears cover. Suddenly, what had been a box office failure was fueling late-night conversations across campuses. Fans didn't just watch it once, they obsessed rewinding key moments and piecing together theories like it was a cinematic puzzle box. The film's blend of small-town Americana, surreal imagery, and existential dread hit a nerve with a generation searching for meaning. Its soundtrack, packed with 80s nostalgia, only added to the mystique. And Jake. Gyllenhaal's performance as the troubled lead became legendary. Over the years, the cult only grew. Midnight screenings popped up, merchandise followed, and Donnie Darko transformed from misunderstood flop to a generational touchstone. What critics once dismissed as too weird or too messy now stands as one of the defining cult classics of the 2000s. Sometimes failure just needs the right format and a little patience to reveal its brilliance. Metropolis, 1927. Today, Metropolis is hailed as a masterpiece, the grandfather of science fiction cinema. But when Fritz Lang's epic premiered in 1927, critics weren't throwing roses, they were rolling their eyes. The original cut was nearly 3 hours long, packed with surreal imagery, political allegory, and towering sets that felt overwhelming. Audiences found it confusing, too heavy-handed, and frankly exhausting. Financially, it was a disaster. The production cost was astronomical for its time, nearly bankrupting its studio. Distributors hacked it to pieces, cutting entire subplots to make it more digestible, which only made the story harder to follow. For decades, Metropolis survived in broken, incomplete versions, more curiosity than classic. But then, something extraordinary happened. As cinema historians began to piece together lost reels, the film's ambition became undeniable. Its visions of futuristic skyscrapers, oppressed workers, and the iconic robot Maria inspired generations of filmmakers from George Lucas to Ridley Scott. What once seemed too strange now looked prophetic. By the late 20th century, restored versions allowed audiences to finally see Lang's full vision. Suddenly, the over-the-top style that once drew laughter was celebrated as avant-garde brilliance. Its commentary on technology class struggle and human ambition felt shockingly relevant in a world of growing machines and widening inequality. Metropolis didn't just survive, it became a sacred text of science fiction, proof that sometimes it takes decades for audiences to realize a so-called flop was light years ahead of its time. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. David Bowie wasn't just a rock star, he was a cinematic alien, and nowhere is that clearer than in The Man Who Fell to Earth. Released in 1976, the film cast Bowie as an extraterrestrial stranded on Earth, trying to use his advanced technology to save his dying planet. Sounds like the setup for a hit, right? Wrong. Audiences and critics found it baffling. The movie was slow, dreamlike, and filled with surreal sequences that didn't fit neatly into sci-fi expectations. Many dismissed it as pretentious art house nonsense, more about mood than story. The box office tanked, and director Nicholas Roeg's ambitious vision was shelved as a failed experiment, but Bowie's magnetic presence couldn't be ignored. Fans who saw him as more than a musician started revisiting the film, fascinated by how seamlessly he embodied otherworldliness. On VHS and late-night screenings, the strange fragmented storytelling began to feel less like confusion and more like poetry. Its commentary on greed, loneliness, and human corruption resonated far more deeply over time. By the 90s, the film had been fully adopted as a cult treasure. Its imagery, Bowie's thin, pale figure framed against American landscapes, became iconic. Directors and writers cited it as inspiration, while fans celebrated it as proof that sci-fi didn't always need explosions to be profound. The Man Who Fell to Earth went from alien oddity to cult classic, cementing Bowie's status not just as a music legend, but as a cinematic one too. Brazil, 1985. Few films have a production story as chaotic as Brazil. Terry Gilliam of Monty Python fame set out to create a dystopian satire about bureaucracy dreams and the crushing weight of conformity. What he delivered in 1985 was surreal, disturbing, and unforgettable. But when the studio saw it, panic set in. Executives thought it was unmarketable. They chopped Gilliam's cut down, tacked on a so-called happy ending, and released a version that critics called confusing and audiences rejected. At the box office, it bombed. Reviewers described it as messy and self-indulgent, and Gilliam was practically blacklisted as unmanageable. But Gilliam refused to give up. He fought the studio, publicly sneaking his preferred cut to critics, who suddenly saw the brilliance buried under the chaos. Slowly, Brazil transformed from flop to legend. Its retro-futuristic design, filled with clunky machines and oppressive offices, became iconic. Its themes of individuality, crushed by endless paperwork, resonated more and more as the world marched deeper into digital bureaucracy. Over time, Brazil earned a reputation as one of the greatest dystopian films ever made. Its dark humor, haunting visuals, and defiant creativity inspired countless filmmakers. What was once dismissed as too weird and too bleak now feels prophetic. Gilliam's masterpiece survived not because of studio support, but because fans and critics refused to let it die. Brazil proved that sometimes the very things studios fear, most boldness, ambition, originality, are exactly what make a film immortal. Solaris, 1972. When Andrei Tarkovsky released Solaris in the early 70s, audiences didn't know what hit them. They were used to action-packed space adventures, or at least something with a little speed. Instead, Tarkovsky delivered a slow, meditative 3-hour journey into memory, grief, and the nature of human consciousness. Critics at the time didn't hold back. Words like boring, tedious, and self-indulgent filled reviews. Western audiences compared it unfavorably to 2001, a space odyssey, dismissing it as Russia's clunky answer to Kubrick. At the box office, it struggled. The length, the pacing, and the philosophical debates put mainstream audiences to sleep. But while critics yawned, Tarkovsky had planted seeds. Solaris wasn't designed to thrill, it was designed to haunt. Its long, lingering shots of nature, the eerie presence of the living ocean on the alien planet, and the heartbreaking story of a man confronted with the memory of his late wife gave it a power that wouldn't fade. As years passed, film scholars and sci-fi enthusiasts began revisiting Solaris. Suddenly, its so-called slowness felt intentional, even daring. The long pauses invited reflection. The film wasn't just about outer space, it was about inner space, about what happens when humans face their own ghosts in an infinite cosmos. By the 90s and beyond, Solaris had become a cornerstone of intellectual sci-fi. Its influence can be seen in everything from Arrival to Interstellar. What once seemed painfully slow now feels prophetic, a reminder that sometimes the scariest alien is the one that looks like someone you've already lost. Tarkovsky didn't fail. He was just playing a game audiences weren't ready for. Akira, 1988. When Akira exploded onto Japanese screens in 1988, it was groundbreaking. But when it crossed over to Western audiences, the reaction was more confusion than applause. The film was violent, surreal, and steeped in Japanese cultural references that didn't easily translate. American distributors hacked it up with awkward dubs, leaving audiences bewildered. Many dismissed it as bizarre cartoon chaos. Box office returns were underwhelming, and critics brushed it aside as incomprehensible anime for niche fans. But Akira was patient. On VHS and later DVD, it became a revelation. Suddenly fans could pause, rewind, and soak in the incredible detail. Neo Tokyo's neon sprawl wasn't just eye candy, it was world-building on a scale rarely seen in animation. The story of Tetsuo's transformation, Kaneda's rebellion, and the unstoppable force of mutation felt like an epic myth disguised as a comic book. What had been confusing on first viewing turned into a cult obsession. Fans dissected its themes of government corruption, youth rebellion, and the destructive power of unchecked technology. The animation itself, painstakingly hand-drawn at a level no studio would attempt, today became legendary. By the late 90s, Akira had transformed from box office oddity to cornerstone of global pop culture. Its imagery inspired everything from The Matrix to countless music videos. The iconic motorcycle slide is still copied today. What once was dismissed as too strange is now hailed as the anime that changed everything. Akira didn't just survive, it rewrote the rules. Star Trek, the motion picture, 1979. When Star Trek finally made its leap from television to the big screen. In the late 70s, fans expected an interstellar thrill ride. Instead, they got what many jokingly called the slow-motion picture. Robert Wise's Star Trek. The motion picture was ambitious, packed with philosophical ideas, dazzling, visuals, and an epic runtime. But for audiences who wanted fast-paced adventures, it was a disappointment. Critics were blunt. They said it dragged, that it was self-serious and overly technical. The story of the Enterprise crew confronting a massive, mysterious entity lacked the humor and heart of the original series. Even die-hard Trekkies were split. At the box office, it did okay, but nowhere near the blockbuster returns Paramount had dreamed of. For a while, it seemed like the big-screen future of Star Trek was in jeopardy. But here's the twist. Over time, fans began to appreciate the film's hypnotic pacing and lofty ideas. Instead of zippy action, it offered meditations on identity, technology, and the search for purpose. Its visual effects, groundbreaking for the time, set a new standard, and Jerry Goldsmith's soaring score gave it a majesty that only grew with age. Decades later, the motion picture is now celebrated as a daring cerebral experiment, Star Trek's answer to 2001. While it may never have been the crowd pleaser, the studio wanted its ambition, earned it, cult respect. It proved that sci-fi could be about awe, not just adrenaline. The Fountain, 2006. Few films divided audiences as sharply as Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain. Released in 2006, it was billed as an epic love story, across time-blending conquistadors, modern medicine, and futuristic space travelers into a single narrative. But when audiences showed up, they didn't know what to make of it. Critics dismissed it as incomprehensible, indulgent, and heavy-handed. At the box office, it flopped badly. Part of the problem was expectations. Marketing promised a sweeping romance with sci-fi spectacle. Instead, viewers got a meditation on mortality, grief, and the search for eternal life. The story jumped across centuries without clear boundaries, leaving casual audiences bewildered. Many wrote it off as an ambitious failure, but in the years that followed, The Fountain found its audience. Home video gave people the chance to revisit and unpack its layers. The haunting visual stars swirling into infinity, a tree glowing with cosmic light, took on new life in slow, thoughtful rewatches. Clint Mansell's score became a cult favorite on its own, playing in trailers, commercials, and fan edits across the internet. The fountain's ambition, once mocked, became the very thing that gave it staying power. Fans began to see its fractured timelines as poetic, its abstract visuals as daring, its emotional weight as timeless. What once was considered confusing became profound. Today, The Fountain is celebrated as a flawed masterpiece, proof that sometimes the most misunderstood films are the ones that endure. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, 1984. Imagine walking into a theater in 1984, expecting a normal sci-fi adventure, and instead being hit with a movie where the hero is a neurosurgeon, rock star comic book hero, and interdimensional adventurer all at once. That was The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. Across the eighth dimension, and audiences didn't know what to do with it. Critics were baffled, calling it incoherent and overly quirky. The marketing didn't help, failing to explain what the movie even was. Box office numbers were a disaster, and the planned sequel, teased at the end, looked dead on arrival. For a while, Buckaroo Banzai was a punchline, proof that too much weirdness could sink a film. But then came VHS. Suddenly, the very things mainstream audiences mocked became selling points. Fans loved the bizarre mashup of pulp adventure, deadpan comedy, and sci-fi spectacle. The cast, including Peter Weller, Ellen Barkin, and John Lithgow, delivered performances that only got funnier with time. Its catchphrases and offbeat humor began circulating among college crowds. By the 90s, Buckaroo Banzai had transformed into a cult juggernaut. Conventions celebrated it, fans quoted it endlessly, and its promise of a sequel became a running inside joke. What had once been an embarrassing flop was now a beloved oddity. Buckaroo Banzai didn't fail because it was bad, it failed because it was too far ahead of its time. Today it stands as a reminder that sometimes the strangest ideas are the ones that stick around the longest. Sunshine, 2007. When Danny Boyle released Sunshine in 2007, he wasn't aiming for another Trainspotting or Slumdog Millionaire. He wanted to craft a cerebral sci-fi about a team of astronauts reigniting the dying sun. On paper, it sounded like a thrilling spectacle, but when audiences saw it, many walked out puzzled. Critics said it started strong, then unraveled. The final act, with its sudden shift into horror territory, drew accusations of being messy and disjointed. At the box office, it barely flickered. But Sunshine wasn't ready to die. Over time, fans started rediscovering it, drawn to its mesmerizing visuals and haunting atmosphere. The shots of the sun blazing across space weren't just pretty, they were terrifying. The score, particularly John Murphy's Adagio in D minor, became iconic, used in countless trailers and shows. And the cast, including Cillian Murphy, Chris Evans, and Michelle Yeoh, gave the film unexpected longevity as their careers skyrocketed. Viewers began to appreciate Sunshine not as a failed blockbuster, but as a flawed gem. The shift in tone that critics mocked began to feel daring, even bold. Its themes of sacrifice, human fragility, and the awe-inspiring terror of space struck a chord with fans who were tired of formulaic sci-fi. Today, Sunshine is celebrated as one of the most underrated space films of the 21st century. It might not have burned bright on release, but it left embers that still glow. THX 1138, 1971. Before George Lucas changed cinema with Star Wars, he made a very different kind of sci-fi. THX 1138, released in 1971, was a stark minimalist vision of a future where humans lived. Underground, stripped of individuality, and controlled by an all-seeing system. Critics at the time didn't know what to do with it. Many called it cold, sterile, and lifeless. Audiences weren't impressed either, and the film bombed financially. But beneath that icy surface was a vision years ahead of its time. THX 1138 wasn't about fun or escapism. It was about control, conformity, and the cost of losing humanity in a mechanized world. For decades it lingered in obscurity, a curiosity in Lucas's career. But then came the rise of home video and fan communities. Viewers began to notice its hypnotic visuals, its haunting sound design, and its relevance in a world increasingly dominated by screens and surveillance. What once felt alienating now felt prophetic. The story of a man daring to break free from a suffocating system struck a chord with audiences who realized Lucas had predicted the world we were walking into. By the late 90s, THX 1138 had grown into a cult classic studied in film schools and praised by directors. It never became mainstream, but that wasn't the point. Lucas's first feature proved he wasn't just chasing box office numbers, he was already reshaping how we imagined the future. The Iron Giant, 1999. The Iron Giant is one of those films that makes you wonder how Hollywood ever missed the point. Released in 1999, it was a heartfelt story about a boy who befriends a massive robot in small-town America. Critics loved it, praising its warmth, artistry, and timeless message. But audiences, they barely showed up. Warner Brothers botched the marketing, unsure of how to sell it. The box office returns were devastating, and the film quietly slipped away. For a time, The Iron Giant looked destined to be a forgotten gem, but fans wouldn't let it go. On VHS, and cable families discovered its magic. The stunning animation blending traditional 2D art with digital touches stood out in an era dominated by flashy computer graphics. The story's heart about fear, friendship, and the choice to be more than what the world expects resonated deeply with viewers who stumbled upon it. Soon, The Iron Giant wasn't just a lost cartoon. It was a cultural rallying cry. Fans began organizing screenings, creating fan art, and quoting its emotional moments. When Vin Diesel's simple but powerful line, "I am not a gun," echoed through living rooms, it became a mantra of hope. By the 21st century, the film had transformed into a cult legend often cited as one of the greatest animated movies ever made. What once was ignored now stands as proof that sometimes the audience finds the movie, not the studio. A Scanner, Darkly, 2006. When Richard Linklater adapted Philip K. Dick's paranoid novel into a scanner, Darkly audiences were intrigued by its strange animation style. The film, released in 2006, used rotoscoping, where live-action footage is painted over to create a dreamlike effect. It was bold, innovative, and divisive. Critics complained it was distracting. Audiences called it confusing. At the box office, it struggled to break even. But Linklater wasn't making a crowd pleaser. He was capturing the unease of a world where identity and perception blur. The story of undercover agents losing themselves in a web of deception was more unsettling than entertaining. For years, the movie sat in a strange limbo, admired by some, dismissed by others. Yet, cult films thrive in limbo. Fans of Philip K. Dick embraced it as one of the most faithful adaptations of his work. The rotoscope style, once seen as a gimmick, began to feel visionary, echoing the fractured realities of the story itself. Its performances by Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, and Robert Downey Jr. were praised for their understated intensity. As time passed, A Scanner darkly grew in reputation. Film buffs celebrated it as an audacious experiment that dared to look unlike anything else. Its themes of paranoia and loss of self felt increasingly relevant in an age dominated by surveillance and shifting realities. What once was dismissed as too strange is now treasured as a cult triumph. Under the Skin, 2013. When Under the Skin premiered in 2013, it sent people fleeing from theaters. Scarlett Johansson as an alien seductress roaming Scotland sounded like a bold, eerie concept. But the execution was unlike anything audiences expected. Long silences, minimal dialogue, and surreal imagery left many viewers frustrated. Critics were split. Some hailed it as genius, others called it unwatchable. The box office was weak, and the film seemed destined to fade. But Under the Skin had a power that wouldn't be ignored. Its disturbing atmosphere, its hypnotic visuals, and Johansson's haunting performance stuck in the minds of those who saw it. Slowly, word of mouth spread. Fans began analyzing its metaphors about alienation, predation, and the fragility of human identity. The film's unconventional style, once mocked, became its greatest strength. On streaming platforms and home video, Under the Skin found its cult following. Directors and critics began citing it as one of the boldest sci-fi experiments of the century. Its chilling score, filled with warped strings and eerie tones, became iconic in its own right. Today, Under the Skin is no longer dismissed. It's celebrated as a masterpiece of modern sci-fi horror. What was once a flop is now a symbol of daring artistry, proof that sometimes the strangest films are the ones that leave the deepest scars. And there you have it. 15 sci-fi films once rejected, now worshipped as cult legends. Proof that a flop doesn't always stay a flop. Which of these underdogs do you secretly love? Let me know in the comments, hit subscribe for more deep dives, and share this with a fellow film fan. Remember, cinema always gives second chances even to the strangest of misfires.